everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley and I like to talk about books, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. So this is now my second time doing the mid-year book freakout tag because I have been on BookTube over a year now. So I have the mid-year book freakout tag from last year. If you're interested and you wanted to check that out as well, I can reference that down below. But I had a lot of fun doing this last year. I'm really excited to do it this year. I really like the idea of it just being a time to check in the middle of the year after you've gotten through half of the books you're gonna read this year and just chatting about some of your favorites or your least favorites. And it's really fun too just to see by the end of the year how some things change, if some of the books that are my favorites right now will continue to be like my top headline favorites of the year by the end of the year, or if I'll find new books I really like. So I just think it's a lot of fun. As I am filming this, it is June 27th and I have literally just finished a book. So I have now read 46 books this year. My goal for this year was to read like 50 books. Last year's goal was like 100 books, and this year, with not knowing how the COVID situation was going to clear up, not knowing what my life was going to look like, knowing I was going to be busier with a move, I wanted to reduce my goal down to 50 books, and I've like almost hit that already. So I'll probably end up reading closer to 100 books by the end of the year. I am impressed with how much I've already been able to read in the first half of the year with how busy it has been, and the second half of the year should be a little calmer, so I imagine I'm going to have time to read a little bit more books. But anyway, I have about 50-ish books to talk about in this mid-year check-in. Not even talking about all the books, just the highlights and the lowlights from them. So the first question is a very intense question, and that is, what is the best book that you have read so far in 2021? And I cannot just pick one, especially because I read so many different genres. I have like a favorite book in the different genres that I read. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of the best books I've read so far this year that are at the top of my list. First up, I have one that's more of like a literary fiction, has some suspense mystery elements in it, but it is far more literary than like a full-blown mystery, and that is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. I adored this book. I read it in a reading vlog. I don't remember what the reading vlog was for, but I'm so glad that I captured this experience of reading this book in a reading vlog because it is such a special book to me. I just adored everything about it. I loved the tone and the atmosphere of it. This is a climate change novel, and I love climate change novels. I adored the main character. I adored the mystery elements that were surrounding her character and just trying to figure her out. And I love everything about this book. It was just so good. So this is a story about a woman named Franny Stone who has just always been a wanderer. She always drifts off. She is just not one to stay in one spot. She's been doing it since she was a kid. And in this book, you are following her as she is following this last flock of these Arctic terns, these birds who are on what is presumed to be their last migration before they go out of extinction. Every year they make this really big migration. It's like the biggest migration of any animal, and she just becomes enamored with them. You don't really know why at first, and she decides to try to track them and follow them on that last migration. Of course, it's going to be a very big bumpy ride. It requires finding someone to let her on their ship and explore the rough waters around Greenland, and it is just such a beautiful journey. You get flashbacks to her past with her husband and her family and just what's been going on in her life and what she's dealing with, and it's just a really beautiful allegory the way you're following these birds on their last migration and you're following her on her kind of migration, and it's just such a beautiful book. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to give away any elements of it, because I just love the way it's laid out, where there's so much that's mysterious that you're trying to figure out as the plot unravels, and it's just really, really good. My favorite horror book of the year so far is a young adult horror book, and that is What Big Teeth by Rose Sabot. This is like very much the Addams Family vibes, so if you like that type of creepy family, kind of funny, weird things going on, then I think you would really like this book. It follows our main character who has been sent away to boarding school, and she has been there for years to the point where she doesn't really remember much about her family or what got her sent away in the first place. And it follows her when she is leaving boarding school to go back with her family, and she moves back in with like her grandparents, her parents, her cousins, her sister. It's like a whole household, and they're all monsters in interesting ways. And it's about her learning about her past. It's about trying to fit in with her family in the current day, and it is just marvelous. I really enjoyed this book so much. I want to be able to reread it again by the end of the year just to be able to soak it all up again. And then my favorite thriller book of the year is kind of a tie right now between more of a thriller and more of a mystery. So the one that's more of a mystery that's my favorite right now is The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. So good. I love Stuart Turton's work. Incredible. Sherlock Holmes vibes, historical, set on the ocean. There may or may not be a devil on this ship. And then my favorite thrillery book that I have read is Who is Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews. This is about a woman who gets the chance to work with an author who writes under the pen name Maud Dixon, and nobody knows who Maud Dixon is, and our main character ends up in a tailspin journey once she starts working with this author. So I don't know how I'm going to be able to answer the question at the end of the year, what was the best book I read in 2021, because I just love so many different books across different genres, and they each give me something different that I enjoy so much. And I am just excited to see how things change by the end of the year and what other favorite books I find in the last half of the year. So the second question is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2021? And typically I do not read a lot of series, and so I haven't had a lot of ease answering this question in the past, but this year I've actually read quite a few more series than I typically do, and so I do have an answer. In fact, I have two answers, and they are both graphic novels. The first one is Delicates by Brenna Thumler. This is the follow-up to Sheets. It is a graphic novel series about a town where there are these ghosts that take up sheet form in the laundromat that this girl's family owns, and it's like a coming of age story. The follow-up is even better than the first one. It did not disappoint me at all. I think it's such a heartfelt story, and I love the artwork and aesthetic of them as well. It's a really good fall read, so if you're looking for some graphic novels for the fall, go ahead and think about getting that one, because I would highly recommend both of them. And then another great sequel that I read in graphic novel form was Wires and Nerves, volume number 2 by Marissa Meyer. So this is a graphic novel spin-off series from the Lunar Chronicles, and I read the Lunar Chronicles like way back when I was in high school. It was like my favorite series ever. I forgot these graphic novels existed, and then I remembered, and then I immediately read them like this January, and I love them so much. I love these characters. I love being back in their world. I just love the found family aspect of their friendship. It is just magnificent. Question number 3 is, what is a new release that you want to read but you haven't gotten to yet? And I have like a million of those, so I'll just highlight a couple. And that would be Hairpin Bridge by Taylor Adams and The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. These are two new thriller books that I have been highly anticipating. Hairpin Bridge is by the same author as No Exit, which is like my favorite thriller book ever. So I'm super excited to read this one as well and see if it also becomes a favorite. And then The Maidens is by the same author as The Silent Patient, which I did not enjoy, but everyone else did. People aren't enjoying this one as much, and so typically that pattern holds for me. That means I should really like this. I am hoping to be able to read both of these books for Summerween, which is in the first week of July, so hopefully I'll be able to get to them very soon because I'm very excited for both of them. The fourth question is, what is your most anticipated book release for the second half of the year? And again, I have a lot. I have a video that I posted right at the end of 2020 talking about my most anticipated books of all of 2021. So you can check that out if you want to hear like a full list of some more books I'm looking forward to in the second half of the year. And I also typically do like monthly most anticipated book release videos. By the time you see this, my July releases one should be up. So if you're looking for books coming out in July, you can check that video out as well. But one of my most highly anticipated books that is coming out in all of 2021 is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This is by the same author as The House on the Cerulean Sea, which was like in my top 3 books of last year. It is hard for me to say my favorite book, but I can usually give like a top 3, and that was in the top 3. It was so good, so heartfelt, so heartwarming, so beautiful, magical, whimsical, great atmosphere. Like everything I love in a book was packed into that book. And so I am so looking forward to being able to read another book from TJ Klune. This cover looks amazing. It looks like it's gonna have similar vibes. So I'm super excited for it. I think it is coming out in September. Let me check. It's coming out in September, like towards the end of September, so it's not too far away. We'll be able to get that before we get the re-recording of Red by Taylor Swift, so it'll just be a good 2-month span. But this novel is described as a contemporary fantasy with TJ Klune's signature quirk and charm about a ghost who refuses to cross over and the ferryman he falls in love with. I think it's going to be so cute. It could be one of my favorite books of the year. I'm so excited to be able to get my hands on this one and read it. The next question is, what is your biggest disappointment of 2021? And I've got a couple, unfortunately. The most recent one was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This definitely was good. I definitely enjoyed it. I definitely liked the characters and the story, and it was a cute little charming fun read. And I hate to say this because I hate to compare an author's second book to their first book, but like this just did not live up to Red, White, and Royal Blue to me. There was just something so captivating about Red, White, and Royal Blue, and the dynamic between the characters and the banter that they held and their slow burn relationship, but also the really high stakes and the tension and just the circumstances of them being together and the challenges that they faced. And in One Last Stop, I thought it was going to be a similarly like spectacular story. This is a sapphic romance about a girl named August who recently moves to New York City, and then she meets this girl on the subway, Jane, who she becomes enamored with, and then she finds out that Jane is in like this time loop. She has somehow slipped through time. She is actually from like the 1970s, and she is just stuck on the subway in time. So I also thought this was gonna be the perfect book for me because I love time loop or like stuck in time stories, especially if there's a romance element, especially if it's sapphic. Like I thought this was going to be the best book I read this year, and it was just not the best book I read this year. The characters didn't have as high of stakes preventing them from being together, and I just didn't get the same like banter and connection between them. I don't know, it just like wasn't everything I wanted it to be. I wanted there to be a little more magic, honestly, with the time loop stuff. I thought that could have been more interesting. And even like the secondary characters, the supporting characters that have this like found family aspect to them, similar to how that also happened in Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like I just didn't care about the characters as much as I did about the characters in Red, White, and Royal Blue as a found family. So all in all, it was just like not living up to my expectations. I think part of it too was just I wanted this to be the best book I read this year because I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue so much. I thought this sounded like the perfect book, but ultimately it was just like an okay romance. And then a couple other books that disappointed me this year. One was The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I read this in my reading blog where I read books about witches, and I thought this was going to be a 5-star read because I have like only seen 5-star reviews for it, especially by people who I know have similar tastes to me. And it was like horror blended with fantasy, blended with some thriller elements, and so it sounded like something I would really enjoy, but ultimately it just felt kind of flat for me. I didn't really like the main character or just the way they moved through the story. They felt like a very passive main character to me, which is not very fun to read. Overall, I didn't really enjoy where the story went. It just didn't really work for me. It was just overall disappointing. You can hear more about it in that reading blog I mentioned if you're curious, but it was like a 2-star read for me at the end of that. And then another book I was really looking forward to was Instant Karma by Marissa Meyer. Like I said earlier, I loved the Lunar Chronicles when I was in high school, so I was super excited to read a new book from Marissa Meyer that also had like a magical element to it. So this was supposed to be about this girl who has the ability to enact instant karma on anyone that she so chooses, except it doesn't work against her arch nemesis, who is this boy in one of her classes, and then they end up like coming together and falling in love too. But there just was not enough magic for me. The instant karma ability thing wasn't even like portrayed as magic throughout most of the book. I DNF'd it like halfway through, so I don't know how the second half went, but it just wasn't magic enough to me. It was more just like circumstance. She kept realizing like, oh, I want karma to fall upon these people, and then it does, and so that was not exciting to me, and it was so slow paced. The first like 100 pages felt so unnecessary. So yeah, it was just a bit of a letdown for me. The next question is biggest surprise of 2021, and that one was definitely Every Value Break by Peter Swanson. I also read this book in reading blog. Don't remember what it was, but I'll throw it here so you can check it out if you want. But I was not sure how I would feel about this book because I have not liked Peter Swanson's books in the past. Decided to give this one a shot because I was getting FOMO, because it was getting picked as a lot of book clubs book pick, and I really like participating in book clubs. I really want to read the same books other people are and like discuss them and have fun conversations about them. So I felt pressured to read it even though I knew I didn't like Peter Swanson, and then it was a 5-star. I loved it. It was so much fun. I had like no complaints. It kept me on my toes. I just really loved it. Everyone else hated it, but I happen to love it. So it was definitely a surprise then. It's still a surprise now that I did enjoy it when everyone else was giving it like 1 and 2 stars, but that was a 5-star read for me. I thought it was a good time. Next question is favorite new author, and this could be either a debut author or an author that is just new to you. I haven't really read many books this year, like from the same author, more than 1 or maybe 2 books from the same author in this year. So I don't have anyone that's like stand out as me reading like all of their books and becoming obsessed with their books. So I would just have to say from my favorite books, Charlotte McConaughey, Migrations, and Rose Zabot, What Big Teeth are definitely authors who are highly on my radar now. Charlotte McConaughey has a new book coming out called something about like Where the Wolves Run or something that's coming out in I think like August. It's coming out very soon, and I am so excited to read that one as well. So this is definitely an author who is super high up on my radar. And then Rose Zabot, the second I finished this book, I went on Goodreads to see if they had any other books in their backlog or coming out in the future, and there was a book coming out in either 2022 or 2023, and I've already added it to my TBR. Like, I know nothing about it. There's not a description. I don't even know if there's a title, but I was like, yep, I will be reading anything else this author writes. Next question is one that I always hate, and that is newest fictional crush. And I don't know. I don't really like get crushes on characters often because I typically don't read a lot of romance, but I've probably read more this year than I did last year. But I just don't like develop crushes on characters to the point where I think about them enough to be able to answer this question quickly. But if I had to like dig through what I've read, what had romance elements, and who I was like crushing on while reading it, I would say Jane from One Last Stop is a pretty crush-worthy character. She is like this punk rock chick from the 70s who is just like very brooding and mysterious, and just watching August develop a crush on Jane does make you also develop a crush on Jane, so I think she was a crush-worthy character. And then I also started reading the ACOTAR books this year, which it's just been a weird year if you find me reading the ACOTAR books and actually really liking them. But of course, Reese from ACOMAF, do I really need to explain? I don't think I need to explain, but like that's a crush. That's like a hard crush. And then I would also say, this one's a little harder to answer because this book is a little hard to grasp, and even after reading it, I still don't fully grasp it, but This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a sapphic romance story that is like through time. There are these 2 opposing forces in these war, and they're like these spies or like fighters for the war, and they like write letters back and forth to each other, and they call each other Red and Blue. And so they're not like in my mind very distinct characters because I didn't fully grasp the book, and I'm definitely gonna have to read it again some point. But the whole like ordeal with them, the love letters they write to each other, and the way that they do it, it's like unique. Like you can drink a drink and like the letter unfolds through the drink. It's hard to explain because it's just kind of a weird book, but like, ooh, that was very good. And I really liked the romance element in that book as well. Next question is a book that made you cry. And I've probably cried in a couple books this year, but I don't remember anything being like super sad that like really weighed me down. I'm pretty sure I cried when I read Migrations in the end because it was just like heavy. And like anything that's my favorite book, I probably cried to some degree while reading it. But one that I read recently that I remember just making me feel very emotional was The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. So this is a new essay collection from John Green that is pretty much just like dissecting the human experience, and some essays are super personal to his life and some are more all-encompassing of just like what it is to be a human and these challenges we face. And it was very much placed in the context of COVID and just how weird the past year and a half has been, and just thinking about what the future looks like, and just thinking about how we've all just been sitting here in our own minds spiraling basically for the past year and a half. So that was just a very emotional read. It was very cathartic to read, and there were some stories or essays that were like more touching that did make me tear up a little bit, especially when he talks about his wife or his kids. But yeah, can't recommend that enough. Really good essay collection. If you like John Green, you're gonna like that book. And I listened to the audiobook version of that. I can't remember if I said that, but would highly recommend the audiobook because he reads it and it is just excellent. The next question is a book that made you happy in 2021, and I know I already talked about this book, but it just made me very happy, so I have to bring it up again, and that is the Wires and Nerves graphic novel series by Marissa Meyer. It just felt so nostalgic to revisit those characters that I loved so much when I was younger in a new and unique way, because it was in the graphic novel form, but also because it was just a new story to me. That book just made me so happy. I felt like I was hanging out with old friends. I don't remember a lot about characters in books all the time, but I picked that up and I remembered everything about all those characters. And there's like 6 of them, and I have not read those books since I was in high school. So it has been a very long time, but it was like instantly falling back in with your friends, and it made me so happy to be able to revisit those characters. The next question is, what is the most beautiful book that you have bought or received this year? I have a couple of answers for that as well. I'm a sucker for a good cover, so I love a good beautiful book. First off, I'm obsessed with What Big Teeth's cover. I love this art. This cover artwork was done by Corey Brickley, and I found that artist on Instagram and followed their account because I just loved this whole art style. I think it's so gorgeous. I think it represents the book so well, and oh my gosh, it is just beautiful. Then I have a book I just completed, and that is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This is an Illumicrate edition of the book, so I don't know what the original looks like, but this one has like this ombre, very deep purple up to like a bright red on all of these flowers, and these flowers are in like the shape of a skull, and they end up going along the back of the book, and they're here around the edges as well, and then they are also sprayed onto the edges of the pages, which I think is so gorgeous. But it doesn't end there. There's also beautiful end papers that show some of the characters, and they're in the front and also in the back. So this is just like one of the most beautiful books I own. Unfortunately, I didn't love this book. It was like a 3-star read for me, but I love the way it looks. And then another Illumicrate book, The Once and Future Witches. I love everything about this cover. I love the colors, the aesthetic. You've got some like scissors and a bird and a snake and flowers and dead flowers. And then the edges are sprayed this really gorgeous red color. You've got the snakes and the birds coming around on the back. There's little stars. I just think this one is so beautiful. Didn't love this book totally either. I actually DNF'd it, haven't finished it yet. I do think I'll get back to it at some point before the year ends. It's just a little slow, so it's a little hard to get into, but I do like it. It just wasn't easy enough for me to like push all the way through. And then the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And to that I say, literally like everything that's on the shelf behind me. Almost everything on the shelf is unread, so I've got to read like all of that. I completely redid my bookshelves when we moved. This used to be a bookshelf for all the books I have already read, and then I would have a smaller bookshelf that kept all the books I hadn't read yet, but that just wasn't going to work for the move. I just had to store away books that I have read and then display books that I have not read on this bookshelf. That was just the easiest way. So I stare at this bookshelf every day and see all these books staring at me that need to be read. A couple highlights from the shelf of things that are high on my radar. I already mentioned some of my most anticipated books for the rest of the year, or things I want to get to very soon. So things like Hairpin Bridge and The Maidens. I'm also really looking forward to the new Riley Sager book, Survive the Night. There's a new thriller book I want to read, Bathhouse. There's some like staple fantasy books that I want to read as I'm trying to read more fantasy. There are just some that people talk about all the time that I want to read so I know what I'm missing. So I have back there, I have Six of Crows, The Diviners, Cruel Prince, From Blood and Ash, all those big popular names. I definitely want to get to those this year. I have a couple classics that I want to read. So I have Jane Eyre, Frankenstein, and Little Women that are at the top of my radar. And then there's all the new books that I'm going to be adding to these shelves as they come out and I acquire them. So it is just going to be a never-ending TBR. So that is it for all the questions for the mid-year book freakout tag. Like I said, I have so much fun putting this together. I cannot wait to look back on this tag at the end of the year and see what new favorite books I find. Unfortunately, I'll probably have more disappointing reads that will come up as well. So I'm really just looking forward to seeing how the rest of the year goes. Comment down below and let me know your answers to any of these questions, but especially let me know what is the best book that you have read so far in 2021, because I am looking for some new favorites to add to the list by the end of the year. So if you've got great thriller books, horror books, romance, fantasy, I read kind of anything around here. Definitely let me know what are your favorite books of the year so far so I can check them out as well. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!